I'm Eleanor, 67 years old. And today was supposed to be one of the happiest days of my life, my only son Maxwell's wedding. I arrived at the country club in my blue silk dress, pearl earrings catching the light as I smiled at everyone. Instead of being seated with family, I was directed through swinging doors to a metal folding chair in the kitchen. Diana's mother Barbara smirked from the head table. Nobody crosses Eleanor Jenkins. Before I continue, where are you watching from today? Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever stood up for yourself when family took you for granted. The revenge I took changed everything. Maxwell was my pride and joy from the moment he was born. I raised him alone after Richard walked out when our son was just 4 years old. It's just you and me against the world, buddy, I'd tell Maxwell as I tucked him in at night, working 2 jobs to keep a roof over our heads. Those early years weren't easy. I was a nurse at Memorial Hospital, taking night shifts so I could attend Maxwell's school events during the day. I still remember his science fair project in 5th grade. A volcano that erupted too forcefully and covered the gym floor with baking soda. We laughed about it all the way home, stopping for ice cream to celebrate his participation ribbon. Maxwell was a bright child with a kind heart. When neighborhood kids bullied the Patterson boy for his stuttering, Maxwell stood up for him. "Everyone deserves respect, Mom," he told me. I swelled with pride, knowing I'd raised him right despite doing it alone. College was our shared dream. I put away a little money each month, sometimes skipping lunch to add a few more dollars to his education fund. When Maxwell earned a partial scholarship to State University, I cried with joy. The day I dropped him off at his dormitory, I whispered, "Your father may have left, but I never will." Maxwell graduated with honors in business administration. I sat in the audience, clapping until my hands hurt as he received his diploma. Afterward, he hugged me tight and said, "I couldn't have done this without you, Mom." Those words meant everything. He landed a job at Meridian Financial, climbing the corporate ladder steadily. We had Sunday dinners every week where he'd share stories about his work accomplishments. I'd listen, offering advice when asked but mostly just beaming with motherly pride. 3 years ago, everything changed. Maxwell met Diana Prescott at a charity gala. She came from old money. Her father Thomas owned several car dealerships across 3 states, and her mother Barbara was on the board of numerous charitable foundations. "She's amazing, Mom," Maxwell gushed after their 3rd date. "Smart, beautiful, connected. She knows everyone who matters in this city." I was happy for him, truly, but I noticed subtle changes almost immediately. Our Sunday dinners became less frequent. Maxwell began using phrases I'd never heard from him before, talking about the right circles and proper society. When they got engaged after 8 months of dating, Maxwell called rather than telling me in person. "Diana's father is throwing us an engagement party at the Windsor Club," he said, sounding excited but distant. "It's going to be quite exclusive." I bought a new dress for the occasion, spending more than I should have on my fixed income. At the party, Diana's mother Barbara looked me up and down before saying, "Oh, Maxwell mentioned you worked at a hospital. How fulfilling that must be." Her emphasis made it clear she found nothing fulfilling about it at all. The wedding planning began immediately, with Diana and her mother taking complete control. When I offered to help with the preparations, Barbara smiled thinly. "That's sweet, Eleanor, but we have a professional wedding planner. Anastasia has done events for the governor's family." Still, I tried to be involved. I suggested the little Italian restaurant where Maxwell and I had celebrated special occasions for the rehearsal dinner. Diana laughed. "We've already booked the Belmont Hotel's ballroom. It's where all the Prescott weddings have their rehearsal dinners." Every suggestion I made was politely but firmly rejected. The venue, the flowers, the menu, all decided without my input. When I mentioned the homemade cake my friend Judith could bake, Barbara actually snorted. "We've commissioned Laurent from Paris. He's flown in specially." Despite my modest retirement income, I offered to contribute financially. "That's my role as mother of the groom," I explained. "Well, perhaps you could handle the welcome baskets for out-of-town guests," Diana suggested after exchanging glances with her mother. I spent nearly $2,000 on those baskets, filling them with local treats and handwritten notes. Later I learned they'd been enhanced by the wedding planner, and my notes replaced with printed cards. The final blow came when wedding invitations arrived. The elegant cream envelope listed Thomas and Barbara Prescott as hosts. There was no mention of me at all. When I called Maxwell, he sounded distracted. "Mom, that's just how formal invitations are done. The bride's family traditionally hosts." "But I'm your family too," I said, my voice small. "Of course you are," he replied, but I could hear Diana talking in the background. "Look, I need to go. We're meeting with the band." Through it all, I kept smiling and trying. Maxwell was my son, my only family. If Diana made him happy, I would do my best to get along with her and her parents. Even when I felt invisible at the bridal shower, I wasn't asked to help plan. Even when I wasn't invited to the bachelorette weekend in wine country. Even when I overheard Barbara telling her friends that it was such a shame Maxwell lacked proper family connections. I told myself that the wedding day would be different. I was the mother of the groom after all. Surely, I would be honored and included in my son's special day. I couldn't have been more wrong. The morning of Maxwell's wedding, I woke before my alarm. Sunlight filtered through my bedroom curtains as I lay there, remembering all the important moments in my son's life. His first steps taken toward my outstretched arms. The day I taught him to ride a bicycle in the park, running alongside until he found his balance. His high school graduation where he'd hugged me and whispered, "We did it, Mom." My modest two-bedroom apartment felt especially quiet that morning. No excited phone call from Maxwell, no text message asking if I was ready for the big day. I tried not to let it bother me as I made my coffee and toast. In the bathroom, I carefully applied makeup, taking extra time with my foundation to cover the lines that had deepened over the years. I'd scheduled an appointment at Lovely Lady Salon the day before, splurging on a professional updo I couldn't really afford. Marge, my hairdresser for 20 years, had pinned my silver hair into an elegant twist. "You'll be the most beautiful mother of the groom," she'd said, securing it with extra hairspray. I opened my closet and removed the garment bag containing my dress. The soft blue silk had cost 3 months of careful budgeting, but seeing it hanging there made the sacrifice worthwhile. Maxwell had always said blue was my color, bringing out the color of my eyes. I'd chosen it hoping he would notice, would remember our connection amidst all the Prescott grandeur. As I slipped it on, I remembered another blue dress. The one I'd worn to Maxwell's kindergarten graduation. He'd spotted me in the crowd of parents and waved so enthusiastically, he'd dropped his construction paper diploma. We'd laughed about it over chocolate milkshakes afterward. From my jewelry box, I took out my pearl earrings, a gift from my mother on my own wedding day. The only piece of real jewelry I owned. Next to them lay a small velvet pouch containing a vintage silver pocket watch that had belonged to my grandfather. I'd had it restored and engraved with Maxwell's initials and today's date. My gift to him, along with a card where I'd poured out my heart about how proud I was of the man he'd become. Before leaving, I looked around my apartment one last time. On the mantel stood photos documenting Maxwell's life. His baby picture, Little League baseball pose, high school graduation, college graduation. In each one we stood together, our matching smiles evidence of our bond. I touched one frame lightly, sending a silent prayer that today would strengthen rather than weaken that bond. The drive to Evergreen Country Club took 40 minutes. Located in the wealthiest suburb of our city, its stone entrance was guarded by wrought iron gates that opened as I approached. The long tree-lined drive led to a sprawling clubhouse overlooking manicured lawns and a glittering lake. 3 valets in crisp uniforms stood at attention as luxury cars pulled up. When my 10-year-old Honda reached the entrance, one young valet stepped forward with noticeably less enthusiasm. "Wedding guest?" he asked, barely looking at me. "Mother of the groom," I corrected gently, handing him my keys. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Oh, right this way, ma'am." Inside the grand foyer, crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings. Flower arrangements taller than me stood on marble pedestals. Servers in black tie carried trays of champagne for arriving guests. I spotted Diana's mother immediately, holding court among a group of elegantly dressed women. Barbara Prescott was a handsome woman in her early 60s, her blonde hair expertly colored and styled, her figure trim in an expensive rose-colored designer dress. Diamond earrings caught the light as she laughed at something one of her friends said. Taking a deep breath, I approached with a smile. Good morning, Barbara. Everything looks beautiful. She turned, her eyes moving over me critically before her lips formed a tight smile. Eleanor, you're quite early. I wanted to see if I could help with anything. I offered. Everything is under control, she replied dismissively. The professionals have it well in hand. She turned slightly away from me, a clear signal our conversation was over. I stood awkwardly for a moment before asking, is Maxwell here yet? I'd love to see him before the ceremony. Barbara sighed as if my question was terribly inconvenient. He's with the photographer for pre-wedding photos with Diana and the wedding party. Oh, I didn't realize the family photos were happening now. Let me just. These aren't family photos, she interrupted. Just the bride and groom and their attendants. Family photos will be after the ceremony. I nodded, swallowing my disappointment. Then I'll just wait until. Actually, Barbara cut in again, the wedding planner needs this area clear for the arriving guests. Perhaps you could wait somewhere else until the ceremony begins. Before I could respond, she turned back to her friends, effectively dismissing me. I clutched my purse strap tightly and walked away, cheeks burning with humiliation. For the next hour, I wandered the venue, finding myself increasingly in the way wherever I went. In the garden where white chairs were being arranged for the ceremony, the florist asked me to please not touch the arrangements. In the reception hall, servers setting tables told me the room wasn't open yet. In a sitting room I thought might be a safe haven, I encountered Diana and her bridesmaids having their makeup done. Diana looked up when I entered, her expression freezing. Eleanor, this is the bridal suite.
I'm sorry, I stammered.
I was just looking for somewhere to wait until. We're actually having a private moment here, one bridesmaid interjected, her tone suggesting I'd committed an unforgivable breach of etiquette. Of course, I said, backing toward the door. Diana, you look lovely. She barely acknowledged the compliment, already turning back to the makeup artist. Eventually, I found a bench in a hallway where I sat alone, watching guests arrive in their finery. Many greeted each other with familiarity. Diana's extended family and friends who'd known each other for years. No one spoke to me, or seemed to recognize that I might have any significance to the day's events. I kept checking my phone, hoping for a message from Maxwell. Nothing came. As the minutes ticked by, I fought back tears that threatened to ruin my carefully applied makeup. This was my son's wedding day. I would not let anything, not Barbara's coldness, not Diana's dismissal, not even Maxwell's absence, ruin it. Just before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, I finally glimpsed Maxwell in the distance, handsome in his tuxedo, surrounded by groomsmen. My heart lifted as I hurried toward him, only to see him being whisked away by the wedding planner. The ceremony is about to start, the coordinator announced loudly. All guests, please take your seats. With a heavy heart, I joined the stream of people moving toward the garden, still clutching the small gift box with the pocket watch in my purse, my card still undelivered. As guests filed into the garden for the ceremony, an usher I didn't recognize approached me with a clipboard. Name please. Eleanor Jenkins. I'm Maxwell's mother, I added, thinking surely this would guarantee me a seat of honor. He scanned his list, flipping pages with a frown. Jenkins. Ah, here you are. He looked up with a professional smile. Right this way, please. I followed him confidently, expecting to be led to the front row on the groom's side. Instead, he directed me to the very last row of chairs, far from the altar where my son would soon be standing. There must be some mistake, I said. I'm the groom's mother. The usher checked his list again. No mistake, ma'am. This is your assigned seat. Looking toward the front, I could see Barbara and Thomas Prescott being escorted to their seats in the first row. Thomas wore a gray morning suit with a rose boutonniere that matched his wife's dress. They looked like royalty, nodding graciously to guests as they passed. On the groom's side of the front row, where I should have been sitting, were people I'd never seen before. Later I would learn they were Thomas's business partners and their wives, apparently more important to the seating arrangement than the woman who had given birth to the groom. The string quartet began playing Pachelbel's canon, signaling the ceremony was about to begin. From my distant seat, Maxwell was barely visible as he took his place at the altar. I strained to see his expression, to catch his eye, but he never once looked back through the crowd to where his mother sat alone. The bridesmaids processed in their blush pink dresses, followed by Diana on her father's arm. She was undeniably beautiful in a custom gown that must have cost more than my annual pension. Thomas beamed with pride as he escorted her down the aisle, and when they reached the altar, he placed her hand in Maxwell's with a formal flourish before taking his seat beside Barbara. The ceremony itself was brief and impersonal. The officiant, some judge who was apparently a family friend of the Prescotts, made no mention of Maxwell's upbringing or our relationship. When he spoke of the joining of two families, he looked pointedly at Thomas and Barbara. I might as well have been invisible. During the exchange of vows, I saw Maxwell glance toward his new in-laws several times, as if seeking their approval. Not once did his eyes search for me. As the judge pronounced them husband and wife, guests applauded while I sat frozen, a polite smile fixed on my face. This was not how I had imagined my only child's wedding day. In my dreams, I had stood beside him proudly as he took this important step. In reality, I might as well have watched the ceremony on television for all the connection I felt to it. The reception began immediately afterward in the country club's grand ballroom. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above round tables draped in white linen and centered with elaborate flower arrangements. A jazz band played softly as servers circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I stood uncertainly at the entrance, watching as guests consulted the elegant seating chart displayed on an ornate gold easel. Approaching it myself, I searched for my name among the calligraphed cards. Table after table I scanned without success. Jenkins, Eleanor was nowhere to be found. "Excuse me," I said to a passing server. "I can't seem to locate my table assignment." "What's your name?" he asked politely. "Eleanor Jenkins." "Mother of the groom," I added, though the words were beginning to sound hollow even to my own ears. He frowned slightly. "Let me check with the coordinator." As he walked away, I noticed Barbara watching me from across the room, whispering something to one of her friends. They both glanced in my direction before turning away with small smiles. My cheeks burned as I realized they were talking about me. The server returned with the wedding coordinator, an efficient-looking woman with a tablet and a Bluetooth earpiece. "Mrs. Jenkins? There seems to be a small issue with the seating arrangements. If you'll come with me, please." Hope fluttered in my chest. Perhaps there had been a mistake after all. Maybe Maxwell had noticed my absence from the family table and sent someone to correct it. I followed her through the ballroom, past tables of laughing guests sipping champagne. For a brief, wonderful moment, I thought she was leading me to the head table where Maxwell and Diana sat with their wedding party and both sets of parents. Instead, she kept walking, pushing through a swinging door marked "Staff Only" that led into a service corridor. My confusion grew as we continued past storage closets and finally into the bustling kitchen where staff hurried about preparing the wedding feast. "We've had to make some last-minute adjustments," the coordinator explained, gesturing to a small table set up in the corner of the kitchen, away from the main cooking area but definitely not in the ballroom. A single place setting waited there, along with a folding chair that didn't match the elegant Chiavari chairs in the main reception. "I don't understand," I said, my voice barely audible over the clanging of pots and pans. "Why am I seated in the kitchen?" The coordinator had the grace to look uncomfortable. There was a miscalculation with the ballroom capacity. Fire codes, you understand. We had to make some adjustments to accommodate all the guests on the bride's revised list. "But I'm not just any guest," I protested, my voice rising slightly. "I'm Maxwell's mother." She nodded professionally, already backing away. "I understand. I'm just following the approved seating chart. Your meal will be served here, and you'll still be able to view the speeches and first dance from the service door if you'd like." She gestured to a small window in the swinging door that offered a partial view of the ballroom. "If you'll excuse me, I need to check on the cake delivery." Left alone at my kitchen table, I sat down heavily, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Around me, kitchen staff worked efficiently, some casting sympathetic glances my way but most too busy to notice the elderly woman sitting among them. Through the small window in the door, I could see Maxwell and Diana at the head table, surrounded by her parents and the wedding party. They were laughing, raising champagne flutes in a toast I couldn't hear. My son looked happier than I'd seen him in years, but it was a happiness that apparently had no room for me. I sent him a text. "Maxwell, there's been a mistake with the seating. I've been placed in the kitchen." Minutes passed with no response. I watched through the window as he checked his phone, read my message, then slipped the device back into his pocket without replying. He whispered something to Diana, who glanced toward the kitchen before shaking her head slightly. That's when I knew. This was no mistake. My own son had agreed to seat me in the kitchen out of sight, while he celebrated with his new family, a family that had no place for his mother. As this realization washed over me, a server named Maria approached my table. Unlike the coordinator, her eyes held genuine sympathy. "Can I get you some champagne, ma'am?" she asked kindly. "The good stuff they're serving in the ballroom, not the cheap bottles for the toast." I nodded mutely, grateful for this small kindness in the midst of such humiliation. When she returned with a full glass, I thanked her. "I couldn't help overhearing," she said quietly. "You're really the groom's mother?" "Yes," I replied, "though it seems that fact isn't important today." Maria shook her head disapprovingly. "That's not right. My mother would haunt me from beyond the grave if I treated her this way at my wedding." Her honest reaction validated what I was feeling, that this treatment wasn't normal, wasn't acceptable. As Maria moved away to continue her work, I sipped the champagne and felt something shift inside me. The hurt began to crystallize into something harder, something that felt like resolve. Through the small window, I watched as Maxwell finally looked toward the kitchen. Our eyes met briefly before he quickly looked away, a flash of guilt crossing his features before he turned his attention back to Diana and her parents. In that moment, something broke inside me, but something else, something stronger, began to form in its place. The kitchen staff moved around me like I was part of the furniture, efficient and focused on their tasks. Chefs called out orders while servers arranged elaborate plates of food destined for the ballroom. The contrast between my folding chair and the elegant crystal and china being prepared for the other guests couldn't have been more stark. A young server dropped a tray of appetizers, and the head chef berated him loudly. "Those are for the Prescott table. Do you know how much those truffles cost?" I sat quietly, sipping the champagne Maria had brought me, feeling increasingly disconnected from the celebration happening just beyond the swinging doors. This was my son's wedding day, yet I might as well have been watching it on television. The wedding coordinator reappeared, her Bluetooth earpiece blinking as she spoke rapidly into it. She noticed me still sitting alone and approached with a practiced smile. "Mrs. Jenkins, I wanted to explain the seating situation more clearly," she began, her tone professionally apologetic. "We had a last-minute change when some unexpected guests arrived from the bride's side. And I was the logical person to remove from the ballroom?" I asked quietly. She had the decency to look uncomfortable. The final decisions on seating arrangements were made by the bride and her mother. I'm just implementing their wishes. "And my son? Did Maxwell approve this arrangement?" The coordinator hesitated just long enough to answer my question without words. "I'm sure he was consulted on all aspects of the wedding planning." A server pushed through the swinging doors at that moment, and I caught a glimpse of the ballroom. Maxwell was standing beside Thomas Prescott, the two men laughing together like father and son. The sight sent a sharp pain through my chest. "I see," I said, turning back to the coordinator. "Thank you for clarifying." After she left, I sat alone with my thoughts, which grew darker by the minute. Through the small window in the door, I could see Diana's extended family occupying tables near the front, cousins and distant relatives who likely barely knew Maxwell taking precedence over his own mother. Maria returned with a plate of food, setting it before me with a sympathetic smile. "I made sure you got the best cuts," she whispered. "And extra sauce." "Thank you," I said, though I had no appetite. "Have you worked many weddings here?" "Hundreds," she replied, refilling my water glass. "But I've never seen a mother of the groom seated in the kitchen before." "Is that unusual?" I asked, wanting confirmation that this treatment wasn't normal. Maria's expression said it all. "In my culture, mothers are honored above everyone except the bride. This," she gestured around the kitchen, This would never happen. And yet here I am, I said, trying to keep the bitterness from my voice. The bride's mother requested this specifically, Maria said in a low voice, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. I overheard her talking to the coordinator earlier. She said there was simply no room for extras at the family tables. Extras. After 35 years of being Maxwell's only parent, I had been reduced to an extra at his wedding. She also said something about you not fitting with their aesthetic, Maria added, her disapproval evident. Whatever that means. I knew exactly what it meant. Barbara Prescott had decided that a retired nurse who had raised her son alone didn't belong among her wealthy friends and family. And somehow, she had convinced my son to go along with it. As I sat processing this information, the kitchen door swung open and several servers rushed in, looking harried. They're about to do speeches, one announced to the chef. Then dinner service begins immediately after. Through the window, I watched as Thomas Prescott stood, tapping his crystal glass with a silver spoon. His voice carried even into the kitchen as he welcomed everyone to this union of two extraordinary families. He spoke at length about Diana's accomplishments, her beauty and intelligence, how proud he and Barbara were of their perfect daughter. When he turned to Maxwell, he spoke as if he'd known him all his life. When Diana brought Maxwell home, I knew immediately he was the right man for my daughter. Ambitious, smart, from good stock. Good stock. Like my son was a racehorse whose bloodlines had been approved. Thomas raised his glass in a final toast. To Maxwell and Diana, may your children inherit the best of both your families. The irony wasn't lost on me. If Maxwell's children inherited anything from both families, it would come entirely from the Prescott side. I had been effectively erased from the equation. Next, the best man spoke, telling stories about Maxwell that I'd never heard. Adventures they'd had at private clubs I didn't know he frequented. This new version of my son, the one who fit seamlessly into Diana's world, was a stranger to me. The maid of honor followed with a speech about how perfect Diana and Maxwell were together, how they complemented each other so well. Some might say it's a match made in heaven, she gushed. But those of us who know Diana know she wouldn't leave something as important as finding the perfect husband to chance. The ballroom erupted in laughter. I didn't find it funny. Finally, Maxwell himself stood to speak. I leaned closer to the window, desperate to hear my son's voice on his wedding day. He thanked the guests for coming, praised Diana's beauty and intelligence, and expressed his gratitude to Thomas and Barbara for welcoming me into your family with such open arms. Not once did he mention me. Not once did he acknowledge the woman who had sacrificed everything to raise him, who had worked nights so he could have new school clothes, who had gone without so he could have everything he needed. In his wedding speech, it was as if I had never existed. Something inside me, something that had been bending all day, finally broke. No more. I would not sit in this kitchen, forgotten and disrespected, while my son pretended I didn't exist. I pulled my phone from my purse and opened my contacts. The first call went to Judith, my oldest friend who happened to be an attorney. Eleanor? Aren't you at Maxwell's wedding? She answered. I am, I replied, my voice steady despite the emotion churning inside me. Judith, I need you to draw up new papers for me as soon as possible. I want to change my will. Your will? Eleanor, what's happened? I'll explain everything later. For now, I need you to remove Maxwell as my beneficiary. The house, my savings, everything. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Are you sure? This is a big decision to make during what must be an emotional day. I've never been more certain of anything in my life, I replied. Can you do this for me? Of course, she said. Come by my office tomorrow and we'll start the paperwork. Next, I called Frank, my financial advisor. Frank, it's Eleanor Jenkins. I need to make some immediate changes to my accounts. I explained what I wanted, removing Maxwell as the beneficiary on my life insurance policy and retirement accounts, reallocating those funds to several charities I had supported over the years. Eleanor, these are significant changes, Frank cautioned. Perhaps we should discuss this in person after you've had time to. I've had 35 years to think about this, I interrupted. The papers will need to be ready to sign tomorrow morning. As I ended the call, I noticed Maria watching me with a mixture of concern and admiration. Are you all right? she asked.
No, iyan suara tunasli.
But I will be. I took out a notepad from my purse and began writing a letter to Maxwell, explaining exactly what I was doing and why. No anger, no recriminations, just facts. He had made his choice, choosing Diana and her family over the mother who had devoted her life to him. Now I was making mine. When I finished the letter, I folded it neatly and slipped it into an envelope. Maria, I said, catching her attention as she passed by with a tray of desserts. Would you do me a favor? Of course, she replied without hesitation. Could you deliver this to my son during the dinner? It's important. She took the envelope, tucking it carefully into her apron pocket. I'll make sure he gets it personally. Thank you, I said, gathering my purse and the unwrapped gift I'd brought. The pocket watch that would now remain in its box. You've been very kind. I stood up from the metal folding chair, smoothed my blue silk dress, and walked with my head held high toward the service exit. I would not subject myself to any more humiliation by trying to leave through the ballroom. As the kitchen door closed behind me, I felt lighter than I had all day. Something had ended, yes, but something else, something that belonged entirely to me, was just beginning. The evening air felt cool against my skin as I stepped outside through the service entrance. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the country club's perfectly manicured grounds. In the distance, I could hear the muffled sounds of music and laughter from the reception. A celebration I was clearly not meant to be part of. Instead of heading directly to the parking lot, I found a stone bench near a small ornamental pond. I needed a moment to collect myself, to fully process what had just happened and what I was about to do. For the first time that day, I allowed myself to feel the full weight of my son's betrayal. Maxwell, whom I had raised alone, who had once called me his hero, had allowed me to be relegated to the kitchen on what should have been one of the proudest days of my life. Not only allowed it but apparently approved it. The realization brought tears to my eyes, but I brushed them away firmly. I would not cry over someone who could treat me with such disregard. Instead, I pulled out my phone again and began methodically reviewing its contents. First, I scrolled through my photo gallery. There were hundreds of pictures of Maxwell from birth through adulthood, holidays, graduations, birthdays, casual Sunday dinners. Each image represented a memory, a moment when I believed we shared an unbreakable bond. I paused on a particular photo taken on his college graduation day. Maxwell stood in his cap and gown, one arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming with pride. "We did it, Mom," he had said that day. "You and me." Next, I opened my financial apps, reviewing the accounts where I had carefully saved for decades. There was the retirement fund that had grown slowly but steadily through years of disciplined contributions. The life insurance policy I had maintained even during the leanest years, ensuring Maxwell would be provided for if anything happened to me. The modest investment portfolio Frank had helped me build once Maxwell was on his own. Most significant was the house, the small 3-bedroom ranch I had purchased when Maxwell was 10, working extra shifts to afford the down payment. We had painted every room ourselves, planted the garden together, fixed the leaky roof on weekends. It wasn't grand by any measure, but it had been our home, filled with love and memories. Its value had appreciated considerably over the years as the neighborhood improved, making it my most substantial asset. All of it. Every dollar saved, every investment made, the home I had maintained had been earmarked for Maxwell. My will, unchanged since he turned 21, left everything to him. I had planned it that way, wanting to give him in death what I often couldn't provide in life: financial security. But as I sat on that bench in the gathering dusk, I realized with perfect clarity that those resources were still mine to direct. And I no longer wished to leave them to a son who could treat his mother as an embarrassment, an inconvenience to be hidden away. I opened my contacts again and called Judith back. "I've been thinking more about the changes to my will," I told her when she answered. "I want to be specific about where my assets will go." "I'm listening," she said, and I could hear her typing notes. "The house should be sold, with proceeds divided between the Nurses' Education Fund at Memorial Hospital and the Single Parents Support Network. My retirement accounts and life insurance can go to the same organizations in equal shares." "What about personal effects? Photographs, mementos?" I considered this. Despite everything, I couldn't bring myself to erase Maxwell completely. Those can still go to Maxwell. Except for my mother's jewelry, which should go to you, if you'll accept it. Eleanor, Judith said gently. Are you absolutely certain about this? This is a significant change during what must be an extremely emotional time. I've never been more certain, I replied. Maxwell has made his choice about what family means to him. Now I'm making mine. After ending the call, I took several photos of my kitchen seating arrangement, methodically documenting the folding chair, the service entrance, the view through the kitchen window to the ballroom where my son celebrated with his new family. These weren't for social media or to shame Maxwell publicly. They were evidence, documentation of the moment my eyes were finally opened. While I was finishing this task, my phone vibrated with an incoming text from Frank, my financial advisor. Eleanor, I've flagged your accounts for the changes we discussed. Nothing will happen without your signature. But everything will be ready tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Are you sure about this? Happy to discuss alternatives if you'd like. I typed back. Completely sure. Thank you for your efficiency. See you at 9. As I put my phone away, I felt an unexpected sense of liberation. For decades, my entire life had revolved around Maxwell, his needs, his future, his happiness. Every decision I made, from which shifts to take at the hospital to how to invest my modest savings, had been filtered through the lens of what was best for my son. Now, for the first time since becoming a mother at 22, I was making decisions based solely on what I wanted, what I believed was right. The sensation was both terrifying and exhilarating. I pulled out a small notepad and pen from my purse and began writing a second note to Maxwell. This one briefer than the one Maria was delivering. When I finished, I sealed it in a small envelope along with the gift box containing the engraved pocket watch. On the envelope, I simply wrote his name. Just as I finished, I heard rapid footsteps approaching from the direction of the country club. Looking up, I saw Maxwell hurrying toward me, still in his wedding tuxedo but with the bow tie loosened and his expression frantic. In his hand was the letter I had sent with Maria. The sight of him, so handsome in his formal wear, so much the successful man I had sacrificed to raise, sent a pang through my heart. But I reminded myself of the hours I had just spent alone in the kitchen while he celebrated with the people he had chosen over me. I stood, straightening my back and lifting my chin. Whatever came next, I would face it with dignity. Mom, Maxwell called as he approached, waving my letter. What is this? What are you doing? Exactly what I explained in the letter, I replied calmly. Making some necessary changes. You can't be serious, he said, his voice incredulous. Cutting me out of your will? Removing me from your accounts? Because of a seating arrangement. The way he minimized what had happened, reducing my humiliation to a mere seating arrangement, only strengthened my resolve. It wasn't just a seating arrangement, Maxwell. It was a choice you made. A statement about where I stand in your life now. That's not fair, he protested. You don't understand how complicated these events are. There are protocols, expectations. The expectation, I interrupted quietly, is that a son would ensure his mother is treated with respect and dignity on his wedding day, particularly when she is his only living parent and raised him entirely on her own. Maxwell ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, disheveling it in a way that momentarily reminded me of the little boy who couldn't keep his cowlick under control. Diana's parents were handling the seating. They have a certain way they wanted things. And you allowed it, I stated simply. You knew where I was seated and you did nothing. He had the grace to look ashamed, if only briefly. What was I supposed to do? Create a scene at my own wedding? You were supposed to stand up for me, I replied, my voice steady despite the emotion building in my chest. The way I always stood up for you. Before Maxwell could respond, Diana appeared, still in her wedding gown but with an expression of annoyance rather than bridal joy. Behind her walked Barbara, her hawk-like gaze taking in the scene with obvious disapproval. Maxwell, Diana called sharply. What are you doing out here? Everyone's asking where you've gone. I needed to speak with my mother, he replied, a note of defensiveness in his voice that hadn't been there when he was speaking to me. Diana looked me over with barely concealed disdain. Couldn't this wait until after our reception? We're about to cut the cake. No, I answered before Maxwell could. It couldn't wait. In fact, I was just leaving. I handed him the small envelope containing my second note and the gift box. This is for you. Though I'm not sure you deserve it anymore. Barbara stepped forward, her diamond earrings catching the last light of day. Eleanor, I think you're being rather dramatic. The wedding coordinator did the best she could with the space constraints. Space constraints that somehow affected only me, I replied. How remarkable. Well, Barbara sniffed, perhaps if you had contributed more to the wedding, you might have had more say in the arrangements. Even Maxwell looked shocked at his mother-in-law's brazen rudeness. Barbara, that's not. It's fine, I interrupted, suddenly feeling very calm. Barbara has just confirmed what I already knew. I turned to my son. Maxwell, I wish you happiness in your new life.
I trulido.
But I won't be part of it if this is how I'm to be treated. Mom, you don't mean that, Maxwell said, alarm replacing the defensiveness in his voice. You're angry right now, but you'll feel differently tomorrow. No, I said with certainty. Some things can't be undone. Being seated in the kitchen of your son's wedding while strangers occupy the family table is one of them. Diana made an impatient noise. Maxwell, we need to get back. Everyone's waiting. Go, I told him. Your wife needs you. And apparently I don't. He hesitated, torn between the two women in his life. For a brief moment, I thought he might actually choose me. Might apologize sincerely, might promise to make things right. Instead, he took a step backward, toward Diana and Barbara. We'll talk tomorrow, he said, as if that would fix everything. When you've calmed down. I am perfectly calm, I replied. Clearer-headed than I've been in years, actually. I turned away from them, toward the parking lot. Goodbye, Maxwell. Congratulations on your marriage. As I walked away, I heard Diana hiss. What did she mean about cutting you out? Cutting you out of what? I didn't stay to hear Maxwell's response. I had said everything I needed to say, and now it was time to begin the next chapter of my life. One that would be entirely my own. I had almost reached my car when I heard rapid footsteps behind me. Turning, I saw Maxwell jogging across the parking lot, the envelope I'd given him clutched in his hand. Diana and Barbara stood near the garden entrance, watching with obvious displeasure. Mom, wait. Maxwell called, slightly out of breath as he caught up to me. You can't just leave like this. I believe I can, I replied calmly. The mother of the groom clearly isn't needed for the rest of the festivities. Maxwell's face flushed. That's not fair. Look, I'm sorry about the seating mix-up, but this reaction is extreme. Cutting me out of your will? Selling the house? Our house. My house, I corrected. The one I paid for with night shifts and overtime while raising you alone. You know what I mean, he said impatiently. The house I grew up in. The one you always said would be mine someday. Things change, I replied. People change. You certainly have. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. What's that supposed to mean? It means the son I raised would never have allowed his mother to be seated in a kitchen while his in-laws' business associates took priority at family tables. It wasn't like that, he protested, though his eyes couldn't quite meet mine. There were complications with the seating chart. Last-minute changes. Diana's extended family flew in unexpectedly from Europe. And I was the logical person to remove from the equation? I asked quietly. The one guest whose feelings didn't matter? Maxwell shifted uncomfortably. Of course your feelings matter. It's just, Diana's family is very particular about how things are done. There are expectations, traditions. Traditions that include hiding away the groom's mother? I interrupted. Interesting customs the Prescotts have. You're twisting this, he said, his voice rising slightly. Nobody was trying to hide you. Then explain to me, I said evenly, why I was the only person seated in the kitchen. Not at a less prominent table in the ballroom. Not even at the singles table or with distant relatives. In the kitchen, Maxwell. On a folding chair. He had no answer for that. And explain, I continued, why you saw me there. Don't deny it. Our eyes met through that service window and did nothing. Said nothing. Didn't come to check on me or attempt to correct the situation. Maxwell's shoulders slumped slightly. What was I supposed to do? The reception was already underway. The tables were set. You were supposed to be the man I raised you to be, I said, disappointment heavy in my voice. The one who stands up for what's right, even when it's difficult. Mom, please, he said, his tone shifting to one I recognized well, the cajoling voice he'd used since childhood when trying to get his way. Let's not let one unfortunate incident ruin our relationship. We can talk about this tomorrow after the honeymoon. I'm sure we can work something out. Work something out? I repeated. This isn't a negotiation, Maxwell. This is me finally seeing clearly what I've been blind to for too long. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've spent the last 3 years watching you transform into someone I barely recognize. Someone who values status and connections over loyalty and respect. Someone who could leave his mother sitting alone in a kitchen on his wedding day and not see anything wrong with it. His expression hardened. That's not fair. I've worked hard to build a life for myself to be successful. Is it wrong to want to move up in the world? Moving up doesn't have to mean pushing others down, I replied. Especially not family. Maxwell's face flushed with anger. So this is my punishment? You're going to disinherit me because I didn't cause a scene at my own wedding. This isn't punishment, Maxwell. It's consequence. You've made it abundantly clear where your priorities lie, and I'm simply adjusting mine accordingly. Before he could respond, Diana approached, her wedding gown rustling as she walked briskly across the parking lot. Barbara followed close behind, her expression thunderous. Maxwell, Diana said sharply, what's going on? We have 200 guests waiting for us to cut the cake. Diana, please, Maxwell said, his voice strained. I need a few minutes with my mother. Diana's perfectly made-up face showed no sympathy. We have a schedule to keep. The photographer is waiting, and we're paying him by the hour. Your wife has spoken, I said quietly to Maxwell. You should go. Diana turned to me, her eyes narrowing. What exactly is this about? Maxwell mentioned something about a will. My personal financial decisions are none of your concern, I replied evenly. Barbara stepped forward, her diamond earrings catching the light from the parking lot lamps. Now listen here, Eleanor. Whatever game you're playing needs to stop immediately. This is Maxwell and Diana's special day, and you're being incredibly selfish. Selfish? I repeated, almost laughing at the irony. I've spent 35 years putting my son first. Everything I've ever done has been for him, and my reward was a folding chair in the kitchen while strangers took my place in the ballroom. Oh, for heaven's sake, Barbara scoffed. It was a seating adjustment. These things happen at large events. There's no need for this. This emotional blackmail. Blackmail? I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Is that what you think this is? What else would you call threatening to cut Maxwell out of your will on his wedding day? Barbara shot back. It's manipulative and inappropriate. Mother, please, Diana hissed, clearly embarrassed by Barbara's bluntness. I looked at Maxwell, waiting for him to defend me, to tell his mother-in-law she had overstepped. Instead, he stood silent, his eyes darting between his wife, Barbara, and me. I see, I said, a strange calm settling over me. Well, Barbara, let me assure you that this is not blackmail. I'm not threatening anything. I've already made my decision. What decision? Diana demanded. I turned to face her directly. I've decided that my assets, my house, my savings, my retirement accounts, will go to charitable organizations that support causes I believe in, rather than to a son who could treat his mother with such disregard. Diana's perfectly controlled expression slipped for a moment, revealing a flash of calculation that chilled me. That's ridiculous. Maxwell is your only child. Your heir. Being someone's child is a biological fact, I replied. Being someone's heir is a privilege, one that can be revoked. Diana turned to Maxwell, her voice low but urgent. Are we talking about the house in Oakwood? The one near the lake? That neighborhood has appreciated significantly in the last decade. The naked greed in her voice confirmed everything I had suspected. Maxwell at least had the grace to look embarrassed. Diana, not now. Yes, now, she insisted. We're counting on that property for our portfolio. It's part of our 5-year plan. The down payment for our dream house. I almost pitied my son in that moment, seeing the mask slip from his wife's carefully cultivated persona. Diana wasn't just a social climber. She was a calculator, and Maxwell was simply another figure in her equations. I'm afraid you'll need to adjust your portfolio, I said calmly. The house will be sold, with proceeds going to the Nurses' Education Fund and Single Parent Support Network. You can't do that, Diana exclaimed, forgetting her composure entirely. I assure you I can, I replied. I own the house outright. I can do with it as I please. Barbara stepped closer, her voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Now you listen to me. My daughter and Maxwell have plans, important plans that include your assets. You will not jeopardize their future over some petty grievance about wedding seating. I met her gaze steadily. Watch me. Maxwell finally found his voice. Mom, please. You don't understand what you're doing. Diana and we've made commitments based on certain expectations. Expectations that I would die and leave you everything? I asked bluntly. He flinched. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant, I said, feeling oddly liberated by the harsh truth hanging in the evening air. You've been counting on my money, my house, taking it for granted just as you've taken me for granted. That's not true, he protested weakly. Then why does Diana know so much about my property values? Why are you discussing my assets as part of your portfolio? My death as part of your 5-year plan? Maxwell had no answer, confirming everything I needed to know. I raised you better than this, I said, my voice softer now, tinged with genuine sadness. I taught you that family means showing up for each other, standing by each other, treating each other with respect. Somewhere along the way, you forgot those lessons. I haven't forgotten anything, Maxwell insisted. I love you, Mom. You know I do. Love isn't just words, Maxwell. It's actions. And your actions today have spoken volumes. Diana made an impatient noise. This is getting us nowhere. Maxwell, we need to get back to the reception. We can deal with this later. I nodded in agreement. Yes, you should return to your guests. They're waiting for you. Mom, Maxwell said, his voice almost pleading now. Don't do this. Don't throw away our relationship over one bad day. I'm not throwing away anything, I replied. I'm simply acknowledging what already exists, or rather, what doesn't exist anymore. The son I raised would never have allowed his mother to be treated this way. Since that son appears to be gone, I'm adjusting my life accordingly. You're being dramatic, Diana snapped. This whole scene is unnecessary. On that point we agree, I said. Which is why I'm leaving now. Enjoy the rest of your wedding. I wish you both happiness in the life you've chosen. I turned and walked to my car, fumbling slightly with my keys as I unlocked the door. Behind me, I could hear Diana and Barbara urgently whispering to Maxwell, their voices sharp with command. Part of me, a small weak part, hoped he might break free from their influence, might run after me one more time. He didn't. As I drove away from Evergreen Country Club, leaving behind the twinkling lights and elegant celebration, I felt a curious mixture of grief and relief. Something precious had ended tonight, the illusion that my son still valued our relationship, still remembered the lessons of his upbringing. But something else had begun. A new chapter where I would put myself first, where my worth wasn't tied to someone who could discard me so easily. The drive home seemed longer than usual, the familiar streets oddly changed in the darkness. Or perhaps it was I who had changed, transformed by this day of painful revelations and difficult decisions. When I reached my modest house, the home I had created for Maxwell and myself, the place where I had raised him alone, I sat in the driveway for several minutes, staring at the darkened windows. For the first time in 35 years, I wasn't thinking about my son's needs or wishes. I was thinking about my own. And despite the heartache, despite the tears that finally came as I sat alone in my car, I felt the first stirrings of something unexpected: freedom. 1 year passed like the turning of a page. Spring arrived again, bringing cherry blossoms to the trees lining my new neighborhood. I sat on my front porch, a cup of tea warming my hands as I watched a pair of cardinals building a nest in the maple tree across the street. My new home was smaller than the house where I'd raised Maxwell, a cozy 2-bedroom cottage in a quiet community of mostly retirees, but it suited me perfectly. The sale of my old house had been finalized just 2 weeks after Maxwell's wedding. The real estate market had been favorable, and the proceeds were now safely divided between the nurses' education fund and the single-parent support network, just as I'd planned. My retirement accounts and life insurance policies had been similarly redirected, the paperwork signed and filed on that Monday morning after the wedding. Maxwell had called repeatedly during those first few days, messages filled with apologies, explanations, and eventually accusations. I listened to each one, giving him the courtesy of hearing him out, but my decision remained unchanged. When he appeared on my doorstep the day before closing, his face haggard from lack of sleep, I invited him in for coffee but remained firm in my resolve. "This isn't about punishing you," I told him as we sat at my kitchen table for the last time. "It's about living what time I have left in alignment with my values." "By giving away our family home?" he'd asked bitterly. "By acting like I'm dead to you?" "You're not dead to me, Maxwell," I'd replied calmly. "You're very much alive. Just choosing to live a life that doesn't include meaningful space for me. I'm simply doing the same." After I moved, our contact became sporadic. Birthday cards exchanged, occasional text messages, one awkward lunch 3 months after the wedding where Diana's name wasn't mentioned once. It wasn't the relationship I had envisioned with my only child, but it was honest, and honesty, I had discovered, was worth more than comfortable illusions. The garden club meeting would be starting soon. I finished my tea and went inside to gather my notes and the seedlings I'd promised to bring. Gardening had become my passion over the past year. The nurturing of living things providing both purpose and metaphor. Some plants thrived, others failed, and wisdom came in knowing which to tend and which to let go. "Eleanor, are you ready?" Maria's voice called from the driveway, where her blue sedan was waiting. Our friendship had been one of the unexpected gifts of that painful wedding day. After I'd moved to my new home, she'd called to check on me, having found my number on the envelope I'd given her to deliver to Maxwell. What began as concern quickly blossomed into genuine connection. Now at 68, I had a social circle more vibrant than any I'd known before. "Coming?" I called back, gathering my things and locking the door behind me. In the car, Maria updated me on her daughter's college applications while I shared news about my latest volunteer project at the community center, a workshop teaching young single mothers basic financial literacy. The irony wasn't lost on me that in cutting out Maxwell, I had actually expanded my life in ways I never could have imagined. "How's the business going?" Maria asked as we drove toward the community garden where our club met. I smiled, thinking of the small crafting enterprise I'd started 6 months earlier. What began as therapeutic hobby, creating handmade journals and photo albums, had unexpectedly turned into a modest source of income when a local boutique owner spotted my work at a community fair. Now I had regular orders and even a small online presence, thanks to my neighbor Roy, who managed the technical aspects in exchange for home-cooked meals twice a week. "It's wonderful," I replied honestly. "I just received an order for 20 custom wedding albums." Maria glanced at me. "Wedding albums? That doesn't bring up feelings." "Some," I admitted, "but not the ones you might expect. Mostly I feel grateful for the clarity I gained that day. Painful as it was, it forced me to recognize my own worth." After the garden club meeting, we joined several other members for lunch at a local cafe. Around the table sat women of similar age but vastly different backgrounds: Judith, my attorney friend who had handled my legal matters with discretion and support; Eleanor, yes, another Eleanor, which we both found endlessly amusing; Patrice, a retired professor; and Denise, a widow who had recently started dating again at 71, much to her adult children's consternation. "They act like I've lost my mind," Denise was saying as our salads arrived. "My daughter actually suggested I might need cognitive testing because I joined a dating website." "Children often struggle when parents step outside the roles they've assigned us," Judith observed wisely. "They want us suspended in amber, available when needed but otherwise not complicating their lives with our own needs and desires." The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and thoughtful pauses. These women had become my tribe, each bringing perspective and companionship to my life. We discussed books and politics, health concerns and grandchildren. Theirs, not mine. Diana had not yet produced the Prescott heirs she had so confidently planned. Travel dreams and everyday irritations. In their company, I felt seen in a way I hadn't for years, perhaps not ever. Later that afternoon, as Maria dropped me at home, my phone buzzed with a text message. Maxwell. Mom, hoping we could meet for coffee next week. There are some things I'd like to discuss. Let me know if you're available. I stared at the screen, conflicted emotions rising. In the months following the wedding, Maxwell and Diana's marriage had faced challenges that surprised no one except perhaps Maxwell himself. Diana's true nature, calculating, status-obsessed, and ultimately cold, had become increasingly apparent as their perfect life failed to materialize as planned. Without my house and financial support to count on, their dream home remained out of reach, causing tension that Maxwell occasionally alluded to in our limited communications. Part of me, the mother who had loved him since before he drew his first breath, wanted to rush to his rescue, to welcome him back unconditionally. But the woman I had become over this year of self-discovery knew better. True reconciliation, if it were to happen, needed to be built on mutual respect and understanding, not convenience or financial necessity. I typed my response carefully. Coffee would be nice. Tuesday at 10? The usual place. His reply came quickly. Perfect. Thank you. Whether this meeting would lead to genuine healing, or merely confirm the distance between us remained to be seen. Either way, I was at peace with the journey that had brought me here, to this house, this community, this version of myself that no longer needed anyone else's validation to feel complete. That evening, I hosted a small dinner party for Maria, Roy, and 2 other neighbors. My dining table, purchased secondhand and lovingly restored, held platters of homemade food and bottles of inexpensive but delicious wine. Conversation and laughter filled the rooms of my small cottage, warming the space more effectively than any heating system. A toast, Roy suggested, raising his glass. To Eleanor, who proves every day that the best chapters of life can begin at any age. To Eleanor, my friends echoed, glasses clinking. I looked around at these people who had entered my life when I'd least expected it, who valued me for exactly who I was. The journey here had been painful, but necessary. Sometimes we must lose what we thought we wanted to find what we truly need. To new beginnings, I amended, raising my own glass, and to the wisdom to recognize them when they arrive. As we continued our meal, I felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over me. 1 year ago, seated alone in a kitchen while my son celebrated without me, I could never have imagined the rich, full life that awaited on the other side of that pain. By standing up for my dignity that day, by refusing to be anyone's afterthought, I had opened the door to authentic joy. Maxwell might or might not find his way back to the values I had tried to instill in him. Diana and her mother might or might not learn that treating people as disposable eventually leaves you truly alone. Those outcomes were beyond my control and, increasingly, beyond my concern. What I knew with certainty was this. At 68 years old, I had finally learned to put my own oxygen mask on first, and I was breathing more freely than I ever had before. What about you? Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between keeping the peace and standing up for your self-worth? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. Remember to like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with anyone who might need a reminder that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity. Thank you for spending this time with me today, and remember, the family we create can sometimes be more nurturing than the family we're born into or raise. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.